We'll call our meeting to order tonight. Renata, if you could do the roll call, please.
English,
Here.
McEvers,
Here.
Wood,
Here.
Gookin,
Sono presente.
Evans, Miller.
Here.
Let's rise for the invocation. We have Pastor Kevin Schultz with the Vine Church with us tonight.
Good evening, City Council members. It's a privilege for me as pastor of the Vine Church to lead us in prayer tonight as you begin your work, which we at our church really appreciate. So let's pray. Lord God, be with these men and women this evening as they serve our city with their time and talents. Give them an awareness that they are God's servants, whom He has given to us and to our city for our earthly well-being and government. Bless them with the wisdom and the courage to do what is right and just and fair, along with a spirit of cooperation and humility to work together for the common good. I ask you to graciously protect them and their families, keep them healthy and safe, and according to your wisdom and love, prosper our communities, prosper our homes, prosper our hearts in ways that only you can do. I ask these blessings in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Woody, lead us in the pledge, please.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Don't have any amendments, so we will move on to public comments. Renata, anyone out on Zoom for public comment that you see?
I do not see any Zoom participants.
Anyone in the audience wishing to give public comment? Don't see that, so we will move on to our annual snow plan. Todd's first annual snow plan. Welcome.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, council members. Thank you for allowing me to come tonight.
You could just say they were not having any snow.
That is what I would like to go
Move to
with.
adopt that plan. Yeah.
Second.
If I made it that far, I'm doing good already. So
Yeah.
anyway, so I wanted to just touch base really quick on Leaf Fest this last year before we get on the snow. It was an interesting season. Mother Nature fought us the whole way near the end. She kind of let up, but in 7 days, we ran 9 trucks and we moved 645 dump truck loads of leaves. I wanted to know how much tonnage we had, but the information hasn't come back from the outfit that hauls for us yet, so sorry for that. We ran street sweepers for 10 days straight, or they took the weekend off, but Monday through Friday, and then 3 days the following week, and we pretty much went from one end of town to the other. So we had, it was a great year for us, no incidents. Our calls were down, so I was really proud of the group. They did a good job, and we just stayed focused and got it done. So anyway, with that, I'll move on to the snow plan, unless there's any questions about Leaf Fest.
Question, Todd, do you have any numbers as far as, so you said 645 truckloads. Did they keep track of truckloads before, or was it tonnage?
It's been both. I couldn't find on the record how many loads we had hauled in the past, so I apologize for that. But we ran more trucks this year than we have in the past. We had the help of Parks and Water Department employees to help fill all the trucks. So 9 trucks was a lot of trucks for us. In the past, we've ran maybe 6, 7 trucks. So that helped us get in this downtown area. We were able to move through the neighborhoods pretty quick. We also started in a different area this year. We started in Fort Grounds. We implemented some message boards this year to kind of, the end of the shift, set it into the neighborhood that we'd be moving into the next day, and that seemed to help move the cars off the street. So we also had some creative thinking that with a new director, the crew has been wanting to share some ideas, and so we've tried some new things along Front Street over here, where there's a lot of parking issues along the curb. We actually put signs up the night before with the date and time, like 3 hours to no parking. And we were in and out of those neighborhoods in about 10 minutes. So we'll do that going forward.
Yeah, the message boards were a good idea.
Yeah, we will do better with those next year. They're solar operated and some of them didn't, there wasn't a lot of sun when we first started, so.
Well, and I would mention too, I happened to be home when they went by with the sweepers after they had picked up, and was kind of impressed to see, I mean, it wasn't just a sweeper went by, but there was a little train of 3 of them.
Yes.
That, kind of in and out and in the middle. So, I mean, that did quite a good job. So.
Yeah, no, there is 3 that work together and they try and stay, they stay a few blocks of each other, but they work together.
Yeah.
In some of our neighborhoods that don't have as mature trees, we don't take the whole train of equipment through there. We'll use sweepers and other means to pick up the piles of leaves, so.
Good.
So the 2020-21 snow plan is very similar to what you guys have seen in the past. We've changed some names, phone numbers, some of that kind of stuff, but a lot of the information, yep, that's right, has stayed the same. So we put some pictures in there, so I'd like it if everyone sees that's kind of what you see when you're on the street. We have in the residential areas a grader that leads, and then we have a loader that follows behind, and so I tried to use that for some of the background for you. But the plowing rates are based on the following. Obviously, hospital access is up there at the top. Major arterials, hills and curves, secondary arterials, school bus routes, and then the residential streets and cul-de-sacs. That's kind of the order we start looking at things. A reminder that I always want to throw in there, because we get a lot of phone calls about this, is we will not plow from the alleys. So we do get people that call wanting us to plow in alleys. So this one here, wanted to just kind of show that, remind everyone that the snow plowing is considering is an emergency action. So, we take it very serious and we get out there. It always helps to have cars off the street, garbage cans, things like that. So you can see it's pretty easy when there's nothing in the way. We can get everything pushed as wide as we need to. We have here some emergency phone numbers. They're non-emergency phone numbers, I'm sorry. Just good numbers to call if you need to get a hold City Hall, Street Department, Police Department. This is not 911, this is calling these departments directly, so we changed that to non-emergency. But those are good numbers to have on hand in the snow plan for citizens and the public to have in hand. Something that we'd like to encourage moving forward is for snow removal issues, we would like to have more people go through our website and they can actually email it to us. If you email to us, our administrative assistant will either call if you leave a phone number or email you back. We respond to every call that we get. So you can go to this on our website. I'd like to remind everyone that our office hours are 7 to 3:30, Monday through Friday. Those are our regular business hours. If you want to call, our snow line is listed there on the website as well. So that's the way you can call, and that's specifically for snow-related calls. We monitor that throughout the shift. Another thing that you can access off the website is our snow plowing map. This isn't a live map. This is more updating where we've been, where we're heading, that type of thing. It is updated during the normal shift, 7 to 3:30. The night shift doesn't keep it updated. We just catch it up the next morning. If we are there on the weekend, we will try and update it if we're plowing through a weekend, but generally it's updated through normal business hours. Our goal is to have the entire community plowed within 40 hours. once we can move, out of the arterial plow mode. So our roadway condition assessment is, we have this color-coded system. In the red condition, more than 4 inches of snow on the roadway surface, or 3 inches of snow with more than 4 inches predicted. So that's when we're out plowing pretty much everywhere. Yellow is when it's a frozen, it can be freezing moisture, rain, 0 to 2 inches snowfall on the roadway. In green is basically can be dry conditions with some surface temperatures above and below freezing. So this is what it would look like for us to do our arterials. That's kind of the map we go off of. Those are the arterials that we look at first when we're doing an arterial plow. And then when we get into the collectors, the yellow kind of references that. That would be everything attached to the arterials there. And then obviously our residentials are marked in green. When we get to a full citywide plow, that's what that kind of looks like. So that would be in that red condition. It's about 520 lane miles of road that we plow. Like to remind everyone that this, with this, gates are in the snow plan. We utilize 4 gates on our machines. The gates are meant to reduce the berm. They don't eliminate the berm completely. As that picture shows, when cars are sticking out past the curb, garbage cans, that's the area we're trying to scoop it from, so it makes it hard to get that berm away from the driveway. Here's just another picture of that. A problem we have is when it's stretched out like this, you can see at the end of the 2 cars there's another driveway right away, and we're trying to carry the snow past the driveway, the garbage cans, the 2 cars on the street, and it becomes problematic. The snow has to go somewhere. Here's a picture. It makes it nice when garbage cans, when they're not being used, are just out of the way, and they're up at the fence. A lot of them live out at the curb through the whole season. So it's just something that we work with. And from there, this is the group that plows the streets as a whole. I'm here to tell you that we are ready. They're all ready and excited for the first snow. We have every pretty much asset that we have is out on the streets in the middle of a snowstorm. So, and this group does a great job. So, at this time, I would be open for any questions.
Questions for Todd? Doesn't look. Dan, did you have some?
Yes,
Yep.
thank you, Mr. Mayor. Todd, I came and visited you and talked about this, but I get questions this time of year, especially down in the older parts of town where the streets are narrow and there's no driveways. What would it take for the city to start a plan where we did an odd, even side of the street thing so that you guys can more effectively plow some of the narrower streets? Or is that something that we can't consider?
It's hard. We've talked about it. I know it's been talked about in the past. It's something that we are going to be looking into better ways to do that. The problem is some of our streets are so narrow, even if you take the cars, if they move them from one side or the other, it almost makes the road so narrow that we can't fit. I mean, there is streets right now that we have a hard time fitting both machines down the road. It's that narrow. The road grader can actually suck up a little narrower where the loader doesn't fit in every area. So it's something we're looking at. I have not had enough time to chase that yet, but we are looking for ideas to help because, as you can see in the pictures, it is a problem. So.
Another issue that comes up is abandoned cars. And so I know that, the code enforcement will come out and tag some of these cars, but there comes a point where it gets really ridiculous. And so what is that point?
So in the heat of a storm, we don't typically deal with that as much. We just are trying to open up as many streets as possible. When we have a large window and we've cleared the berms from Sherman Avenue and things like that, we do contact code enforcement and they assist us. We will typically have them tag the cars, let a certain amount of time go by, and then we remove the cars if we have to. We normally have a small plow crew go through and clean up the street. Most of the time they get the cars off the street, but it's in the off time of the storm. I mean, we don't do it during the middle of the storm, but we have last year, I think one day we moved 12, 15 cars from downtown. So we do that as time permits.
And do you know if code enforcement goes out before, like around this time of year, to look for any boat trailers and flatbed trailers and other things that are just parked on the street, which is illegal, but are they going to be doing a kind of a sweep before the snow starts to come?
They will, if we ask them. This year we talked about that, like with our sweeper operators, told them as they saw problems like that to let our office know, so we would have a list that we could turn in, and then we could tag the vehicles or the campers, trailers, whatever. And so, yes, we have started a list, and we do try and do that.
Very good, thank you.
Just one more.
Kiki?
Just one thing, we touched on this in the, I get asked this, is there a situation, or are you working on possible resources for someone who, say, had just an interim issue where they couldn't plow their driveway, they couldn't get their berm out themselves if they went online and wrote that in? Is there any kind of resource like that available?
In the past, and it's in the snow plan still, there's a phone number through the senior center, and they will, they've worked with people in the past. I've heard that we've used work release, even they have, not us. So I was told this year it's a little tricky with the COVID. They're having a hard time. They're not letting the work release out to do that kind of stuff. So no one was quite sure how they're going to handle that, but the phone number is still there, and I'm sure that they would try and do what they can do.
Okay, thank you.
Anything, other questions? If no other questions, we'd be looking for council action.
So motion to approve the 2019-20 snow plan.
Second.
So that technically, I'm surprised you didn't pick this up, Dan. It's actually the 2020-2021.
I just read it, I don't pay attention.
You let that slip
You caught me, Mr.
without
Mayor.
correcting that. Okay, so we have a motion and a second to approve the 2020-2021
Thank you, sir.
snow plan. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
I'm sure nobody's opposed. Thank you, Todd. Appreciate it. Move on to the Atlas Waterfront Project update. Phil Boyd with Welsh Comer is here tonight. And Tony.
2 for 1. Renata trained me up on this.
Thanks, Phil. Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm here tonight on behalf of the Ignite CDA Board to request the city's consideration of transferring to Ignite the city's newly acquired 4.5-acre triangle parcel, property located adjacent to the agency's Atlas Waterfront Development Project. In June of 2020, the city transferred all of the green highlighted property depicted on this slide to Ignite. That's a total of 45.5 acres. Upon transfer, the city stated the city desires to transfer the Atlas Mill property to the agency to facilitate the development of the Atlas Mill property for the benefit of the city. The city and Ignite have been working in partnership to develop and sell this property within the Atlas mixed-use waterfront project using the more flexible and efficient land disposition processes afforded to urban renewal agencies by Idaho statute. The hope was that if the city could gain control of the triangle parcel, which is depicted on orange, well, kind of orangish, on the slide, that the triangle parcel would be incorporated into the Atlas waterfront development. In order to provide City Council with an overview of development possibilities for this triangle parcel, city leadership asked Ignite to develop potential development scenarios for the triangle parcel. Ignite engaged its Atlas project consulting team, which consists of Welsh Comer engineers, Heartland Real Estate Advisors, and GGLO Land Planning to assist in developing the requested scenarios. Scenarios that will be discussed this evening will include scenarios where the city retains ownership of the triangle parcel and sells the parcel to the open market, and scenarios wherein the city transfers the triangle parcel to Ignite for inclusion in the Atlas waterfront project. As for disposition of the triangle parcel, as you know, the city can dispose of property through a land surplus bid process. This process provides the city with limited control over how or when a parcel is developed. Ignite CDA can dispose of property through a competitive request for proposals where several factors, including sale price, are considered within a disposition and development agreement. The RFP and DDA processes provide greater land use flexibility and development timelines, which may yield higher land prices and faster land development, which will drive tax increment revenues. This property disposition ability of Ignite was the reason City Council transferred the aforementioned 45.5 acres to Ignite. Ignite CDA is moving forward with the next phase of the Atlas Waterfront Project and believes integrating the triangle parcel within the Atlas Waterfront Project will create the most desirable neighborhood configuration and yield higher long-term value to the community. To that end, Ignite would like the city to consider transferring the triangle parcel to Ignite so it can be integrated into the Atlas Waterfront Project in one of the two Ignite CDA development options that will be shown and discussed this evening. I would now like to invite Phil up here to share with you some background on the project and to run through the scenarios.
Thank you, Tony, Mr. Mayor, and council members. So tonight, our objective, as Tony stated a little bit, is to get the city council an update on our current master plan, the master plan update, one scenario, and then talk about the potential uses for the triangle parcel and their development scenarios. So I'm going to go backwards a little bit to kind of refresh everybody's memory on what has been sold, what the project originally looked like, and then I'm going to move forward and talk about potential land use scenarios, financial, and pro and con. So this is actually out of the development standards that were approved as part of the PUD, and I highlighted two elements of it because these elements, I think everyone will agree, are important because they actually came out of the community meetings that we did early on. And if everybody remembers, Councilmember Miller actually started it right here with Hillary with a really cool presentation, and it rolled to where we are today. But the big one was supporting and preserving the entire waterfront. So I think, as we all know, to take that most valuable piece of real estate out and put it in the public hands required a trade-off, and that trade-off was higher density. And so that's one of the things that you actually see here was part of the criteria in order to generate enough revenue to make the project financially feasible, which, remember, that's an underpinning of urban renewal district formation, is financial feasible. We had to have that higher density. So we did a master plan. This is what it currently looks like. I'll point out a couple of things here in reference. You see the triangle piece that's not included. And then you see kind of this funny street that comes up and runs like this. And there's nothing here, and there's nothing here, and there's nothing here. And to refresh everyone's memory, there's some historic pits that were mined here, 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 and here. And I'll show you more of those. They were mined, we believe, because of the I-90 construction that occurred in the 50s and the 60s. That material was used in I-90, and then the mill down here said, hey, great, gigantic hole there, let's fill it with stuff. So it's filled with unsuitable material, which is why the road kind of makes this funny route here. One of the things I'll show you in a little bit is how the triangle piece, if it's transferred to Ignite, allows some effective remediation, cost-effective remediation of that. Mr. Mayor, I didn't ask if you wanted me to take questions as I go through, which I'm glad to do.
Council, please feel free to ask questions along the way.
So that's the background of the master plan that you see here, the original master plan. These colored areas here, areas 1 and 2, 10 and 12, 13 and 6 were sold as part of phase 1. And here was the original mix of land uses that were envisioned here. In phase 1, and those two yellow ones were a typo I had in your packet, so I updated them here. But when phase 1 was put out to RFP, and as Tony mentioned, when the RFP goes out, the developer or the buyer has the option to look at different land use scenarios that are permitted in the development standards. So for instance, in this area, the developer could choose to do townhomes, or they could do single-family homes. So we had envisioned a mixture like this. In phase 1, this is the mixture we received, and you can kind of see it's heavy on single-family, because this is less than 50% of the project, but we're getting more than 50% of that product type in here. And there was a lot of effort that went into this. The city staff was involved, the land use planning, we have a development committee, and the idea was to create a mixture of home types in there. So it wasn't just this homogeneous kind of single product, single price point development. So you can see how we've got not many townhomes, a lot of single family, a pretty healthy dose of multifamily, and then not much retail and not much office, which is probably not a giant surprise in the current climate.
Bill, those percentages
Yes, sir.
there, not intended to add up to 100. I'm a little confused by the percentages there. So it says 12, 71, 44, 11, 11.
There's probably, you're right. Oh, that's because I have this, that total right there. It's dwelling units and it's, yeah, that must be where, because I have that error in there and I didn't go back and redo those. Yeah.
So those percentage, when it says 71% of original land use is single family,
Of that particular product type.
okay. Okay, I see what it
Yeah. So then, to give you a little taste of the land disposition process that Ignite goes through and kind of the level of effort and I guess that's associated with it, one, but the reason for it in order to make sure that the product that Ignite receives and the city receives ultimately is very well thought through. There's an RFP that goes out, and as Tony mentioned, it's not just who's going to give us the highest price. There's also some other considerations that go into it. There's a committee that looks at the solicitations when the RFPs are submitted by developers and ranks them and makes a recommendation to the board. And if the Ignite board says, yep, those are good recommendations, please proceed with negotiations. And then you get in this do loop here with developers that probably doesn't surprise anybody. And eventually you get to the point where we think we've got a deal. It goes to the board says, yes, move forward, complete the DDA. You do some more in here, and the attorneys talk to each other a lot for both Ignite and the developers. Eventually, you get through that process. The developer submits what their final design is for those sites, and we move through, and they eventually go to construction. So this is the current process. The board is considering a more streamlined process, because the way it was originally envisioned was to sell these in these big blocks of land. So that blue area and that blue area was sold as one big block. Because of that, the developer takes a little bit more of the margin. So there's not as much revenue that flows directly to Ignite. And that was kind of a conscious decision that the board made at the time and said, geez, we want the market to speak and give us, what's going to drive that area. Another way to look at it is a lot of that profit also the developers kept. And so the board is considering or has decided to move to more of a lot level sale, but in groups of 4.
Bill, when you talk about the RFP process, that it isn't only based upon price, I think you're going to reassure the council, though, that price is at the top of the priority list, right?
And that's the Councilmember Wood is correct that was wasn't the primary motivator, but in the instance of phase 1, all of the highest priced options were selected. It turned out that the product types proposed by the developers were all very similar and good product types. We didn't have any things that were not super desirable. But the Councilmember Wood is correct. In this case, the highest price prevailed, and I anticipate moving forward, it will be heavily weighted on all the other ones that we do.
Thank you.
So I'll run through some quick snapshots here to show you what the product types look like. This is the snapshot out of Area 1 and 2. This is from a local developer, Bluegrass. Many of you may be familiar with, and this is examples of the product they propose to put there. Higher end, single family, very nice, on the waterfront on this side, or on park front, and then this side backs up to a street here. This is over on Area 6. This is Active West Development, also very nice product type that they're putting here, which is really good to see, right? That's part of the thing that Ignite was encouraging, and the city. And you can see their layout down here. To give you your bearings, the Prairie Trail is right here, and then this is Suzanne, and the park parking lot is right down there. So this is kind of a townhome duplex product, parking underneath.
What do you have a question?
So this design is the cool
design, there's no traditional type housing, what I grew up in or what I see around town.
So,
This is the new cool.
well, this is, and that's that's a very good point. This is currently what has been proposed. In phase one, there were not architectural standards. And so I mentioned there were development standards, this document, and essentially the development standards were used as part of the PUD, and it kind of located where your house can be on the parcel, but it didn't tell you what your house was going to look like. It didn't control that. That was also a conscious decision early on by Ignite. When we got into this process here, and I'll use that probably Hillary and her team, who did a really good job at looking these and looking through the development standards, there were some things that we looked at and said, gosh, that's really not where we were headed. And so the decision's been made to move forward with architectural standards, which will give us more definition and perhaps avoid, kind of this mixture here that some of these don't maybe make a lot of sense next to each other. But in this situation, we didn't have the control. Moving forward, there will be more control on the architectural standards, not down to the color of the house, but you're not going to be able to paint it pink. There'll be a range of colors, but it won't be some of the strange things that we see.
But this is the look that particular developer
Correct.
wants to do.
Correct.
Okay.
And you'll see that here. And some of these are very nice. You see a mixture of wood and steel here, and the facade has some up in and out and up and down on it, and so you just don't have these gigantic walls, because this is a very tall structure.
I just always ask, where's the snow go?
And those are
look like
questions
they
the
thought about
planning department actually really digs into, and again, Hillary's shop does a really good job, and we are always pointing that out, and they talked about their snow storage, in this case, here, and down in here. So those are questions that do get asked. This is over on Area 10, which is up next to Celtice Way. So this is Atlas Road. There's the edge of the roundabout. Here's Celtice Way. This is a multifamily parcel here. And you can see it's 3-story peaked roofs. This is Area 12. The water is down here. There's a little commercial use down there, hopefully a food and beverage use down in this area here, which was a requirement for that park front, because you want some activity there to happen. This is Area 13, which is right next to the park. And here there's proposed 3 upper floor residential and lower floor retail commercial, because the lower floor, again, is supposed to activate that ground plane. Both 10, 12, and 13 were Ignites in negotiations with a developer out of Boise called the Chase Mixus, and they do a lot of this product type here. So the triangle parcel. So the very desirable triangle parcel, that's where I think most of us are familiar with where it exists. One of the things that's hard to tell from an aerial photograph is there's quite a bit of relief between this point and this point, about 40 to 50 feet. On this end, there's about 20 feet from here to here. So there's quite a steep slope that goes up here. Some of it is very unstable, meaning that the slopes are too steep, and so they continue to kind of slide downhill a little bit. This is another photograph for one of our flights. You can see the park is, this was earlier in the summer, but you can see the park down there, the stale ice shoreline. The triangle parcel kind of sits in there like that. It's pretty heavily treed, which obviously with development, many of those trees will end up coming down. And then Ignite's parcel is kind of right next door there. So a couple of really important features of the triangle piece is, one is it allows additional density. It improves the road network. And so currently this road does not extend through here. It just kind of stops right there. And these parcels are not, these little lots down there are not parcels. So you come to here and the road network goes down like that. This road through here obviously provides a really nice connection through the development. It also gives opportunity to put some additional lots in there. But one of the most desirable features from a guy who likes to move dirt around, this area is a pretty steep slope in here, so you can't really build anything on it. But it has a lot of suitable structural soils. And there's 2 pits here that need to be remediated in order to make those areas saleable. Now, one way to do that in the plan that we currently have without the triangle parcel is eventually mine those pits out, put them over here onto Mount Hink, and then you just wait as structural soil is developed by the community through construction projects, and you give them a low-cost place to come and tip structural soils, and then you pay to spread it and compact it, and, 4, 5, 6 years later, you would have a parcel that is structurally suitable to sell. Maybe it happens faster, maybe it doesn't. With the triangle piece, if we're able to extend that road through here, we can go in and mine all that material, build a retaining wall through there, and for sure fill that pit and potentially fill this pit as well. So that brings that product for sale sooner, which puts the property tax on the books sooner, which drives increment sooner, which are all positive things for the project.
So what you're saying is there's enough material for what you could mine out to create the pit sooner?
Correct.
It'll balance the
Yep, we can
quantities there.
remediate the pit. So pit 1 and pit 2 would be, pit 1 would be the first one. And remember, there's a cost to do this because Ignite is fronting the money to go build this. There is revenue that's coming off of phase 1, but it won't fund everything. So you go mine pit 1, potentially pit 2, and we're speculating on how extensive these pits are. We used a bunch of old aerial photographs, some soil borings that we had, to determine the quantity of material. It would come out of there, get moved over to Mount Hink, and then this material would get mined and put up to here.
And this soil down on this material is suitable for that?
Yes.
Thank you.
So the Alice Waterfront Master Plan, the kind of one scenario, the primary scenario that seemed to have most attention or most desirability with the steering committee and the Ignite board, with the development committee, is this idea here. If Ignite were to acquire the triangle parcel, would be extending the road through here, as you saw earlier. This road would come in, and currently it would just dead end here. There'd be a turnaround, a cul-de-sac there. There's single-family homes here. There's a gap right here. And the reason that gap is there is because that's like the steepest part of the project. The other reason that it's there is it's a really good opportunity to put an access that would come down here and connect. So you can imagine as you're coming along the trail here at Celtice and you look down and you say, hey, I see the water. And you could just make your way right down to the water through there. Single family through here, and you can see I've tried to shade the triangle parcel here. So single family, and then townhomes through here. And the reason that the townhomes are there is because the noise and whatnot that comes off of Celtice Way, it's a product type that's probably more appropriate there. And you can also, there's 13 units there, 13 units there, and they face inward. And there's parking underneath, and you have a little bit of a green space in between them. Here are the pit outlines that I mentioned earlier. So this is pit 1, pit 2, 3, and 4. So this is we had a workshop with the Ignite board, gone through several scenarios. The board said, gosh, we kind of like this one. The other one that they looked at had townhomes here and here. So this whole thing would be townhomes. But the desirability of kind of having these single-family homes looking out over the water is pretty nice. So the Ignite board said, geez, that's kind of the direction we want to head. At that meeting, the mayor said, well, gosh, there's some other scenarios. Can you develop some other scenarios and bring those forward to council so council can kind of look at this range of potential scenarios? So that's what I'll move into now.
Bill, let me ask you real quick
Yes,
on
sir.
this particular one. So those single-family homes are not like under a hillside ordinance, correct?
Correct, because they are on a flat area.
But they are overlooking it.
Correct.
Okay.
Phil, you mentioned a difference in sound with townhomes versus single-family. Maybe explain that a little bit.
Well, so the sound won't be any different, but if you, the kind of the desirability of placing a single-family home that backs up to that area right there, that's one of the issues. On this wall right here, you could literally, make that, I don't want to call it a blank wall, we couldn't do a blank wall there, but you would have a little bit less impact on there. So if you happen to live in that townhome, the impact to you there would be less. The other motivation for this is the diversity of product type. You guys saw how many single-family units were down in here. And one of the things that Ignite has been trying to do as part of this is provide a diversity of product types. So it's not just all single-family.
So if I had a townhome there, or I had a house there in the same spot, I'm just trying to figure out why the noise is, why that situation is different.
If you occupied that townhome on the end, it's probably not. If you occupied the second townhome in, it would be. Because you're buffered from that sound. Your neighbor is actually buffering the sound from you because you're not directly next to it.
Bill,
Yes, ma'am.
so you're probably going to get deep into this, but there's a huge price difference going with townhomes versus single-family.
Yes.
And then at the last meeting that we did together as a committee, I had asked about inquiring with a local realtor, I didn't care which one.
Yeah.
Just someone with a lot of experience
Yep.
to talk about what's actually selling. Just anecdotally, I think single families is what's desirable here in North Idaho. And then for mixed product use, all you have to do is go right across the street to Suzanne, on the other side of the Prairie Trail, and there is all kinds of multifamily, all kinds of single-level senior housing. So I don't really understand the desire to replicate that on this piece when we have so much already.
So the one distinction is for the most part, for the areas I'm familiar that you're describing on the Riverstone side, those are for rent product. This would be different than that. This would be encouraged to be a for sale product. So there would be ownership here as opposed to renting. The other idea is you're putting more people in this area, so you're driving the density up. And then the other kind of idea is you're perhaps lowering the price point. So some folks can come and live here that might not be able to purchase a single-family home here. Now, it's debatable about whether the city or Ignite should be in that business of kind of engineering what the land use type is, but that's one of the decisions that has been made, and we had heard that having a diversity, and just as a good planning process, and Hillary could speak to this, having a diversity of home types and a development is a good thing to have. Just having kind of a single product type with a single economic group does not promote great neighborhoods.
But you really don't have that, though. You don't, if you have single-family and then all these multifamily, you have that diversity.
If you're right. If you're casting your net wider and wider, or looking at the area broader than outside of this, you're right. There is a different product type out there. And
I just think the
yeah.
townhomes, the price difference is so much. And townhomes might start out as, we can live here and buy this, but sometimes they become investment properties that end up
Yep.
being rentals anyway. So I would just ask the Ignite Board to be very cautious about, we know we have a tremendous amount of debt to repay, and we really need to maximize what we can get out of this property.
And I think that was the objective of the mayor, is to show that difference here, and I'll move through that as you mentioned. I'll start looking at that, and so I guess moving right into that, you've segued for me. We developed a scenario here that shows if we were to go in and we'll take it to the extreme where we're going to go in and put a gated community here, because obviously that's going to drive values in there. You could put a gate here, there's your turnaround, you could put a gate there. This is just a dead end turnaround here. We would go in and just fill this whole thing, so that broader open space that we had here before, I put a parcel in there. There's still maybe a potential way to sneak through there, but if this is gated, you might not sneak through there. And then we put single-family homes in here. And so zooming in on it a little bit more, you can see how that might look. That little shaded area right down there, that is, again, the steep area. And however this unfolds, whether the city decides to keep it, one of the things that Ignite would really like is for the city to transfer that piece, because it's got the soil in it through that whole area that allows us to build that road, flatten that area out, build a retaining wall, and take the soil through this whole area and remediate Pit 1. So that's kind of a baseline request, as you'll see in each one of these moving forward. The scenario that that I showed on this first screen here, and I'll just zoom right into it here, you can see there's homes here. You can see the very steep topography in here. It flattens out a little bit in here, but that area is very steep, and they're a little bit challenging to build houses on. And then you'll see the the townhome product that's shown there. These areas, 16, 17, and 18, if you kind of remember those, because when we get to the numbers towards the back, those become relevant, area 16, 17, and 18. And then you can see areas 9 and 19, which are on that Ignite parcel. Moving into another Ignite land use scenario is a little bit of single family here, but turning this whole thing into townhomes. And so you kind of look at what that would look like. Again, debatable about how desirable this is from a broad perspective, but one of the ideas is you're putting more people here that have views out to the river as opposed to just a few. These homes down in here are still shown as single-family homes. Just a tough site to develop in a bigger format. Then the last one, and the mayor and I had talked about this, and he says, gosh, it might not be the number one use, but shoot, let's look at if it's multifamily, if it's hotel, if it's office, if we were to just open it up, what are the possibilities here? I could have configured it in, every one of those individually, but rather than do that, I just laid in 2 multifamily houses or units in here. This configuration, maybe a little bit more detail than you want, would be a single loaded corridor, because obviously the views are this way. So you want this very long building, if I were developing it, so every one of my units had a view of the river, so of course you can rent them for more. This shows a gigantic surface parking lot which parks this, and I think I have it in there at about 1.75 or maybe 2 parks per unit. In here, there's 75 units in there. So that would be one configuration. You can imagine it being hotel or office would be similar to that. The surface parking in those scenarios would probably be a given in there. So surface parking is not super desirable, but it's also next to a busy roadway. That's what that looks like, kind of zoomed in at it. And you can see there's a little bit of challenge with the topography there as well. So then moving into the numbers, and back to Councilmember Wood's question about the local developers. Yeah, our consultant, Heartland, reached out to realtors and talked to several local realtors. They also used the valuation. So back on the phase 1 process that I mentioned to you, the RFP process, part of what happens in that process is Ignite goes and gets a valuation of the property based on an appraiser. So an appraiser goes in and looks at a long process, and at the end of the day says, here's what the land value is worth. So we had the benefit of having that information, and so went in and calculated square footage on each of these areas, 16 and 17 and 18, as I mentioned, for the different types of land use. So in this case, it's single family, single family, single family. We labeled that as a city option because it's not necessarily one that Ignite would promote if they were in complete control of the parcel, and calling it a high-end development. This is some mid-range, this is an Ignite option, mid-range down here, and then these 2 city options. And so summarizing that, and you guys have seen this in your packet, option 1, the single family obviously yields the highest residual land value of it. It's going to be a strong promo of it, strong product sales. It's going to move probably right out of there. One of the cons is there's already a lot of single family in there. It's got a high price point, and adjacent to Celtis Way may be a challenge. But then in the current market, it may not be. It may go very quickly. The next option, I'm looking at a mixture of single family and townhome, and I did these in the order of value here, by residential and then by the kind of the non-residential. And so you can see each one of those as we move down the list here. We get into townhome, that is a lower price point, as Councilmember Wood pointed out. And then hotel, talked to a local realtor here that deals a lot in hotels and multifamily products and office product. And it was interesting, the hotel market, of course, just has slowed way down currently. He anticipates in Coeur d'Alene it's going to come back up. So we might be sitting in on this deal if that was one of the options. I think multifamily would be very strong because we see it very strong elsewhere. Office would be a super big challenge, as we saw in phase 1. We did receive some proposals in phase 1 for office, and the numbers were very low and weren't accepted, and multifamily was used there.
What did you have a question?
Yeah, so when you come to that net revenue, is that after infrastructure and everything? That's
Yes.
the bottom, that could help pay for the loan.
Yes. Or however you all decide. I'll jump back up here. And one of the things I kind of glossed over here is, here's the gross revenue up here. So from each one of those, and then the development cost is estimated at 800,000. And that would fund, in this case, putting this road in, the water, the sewer, platting, removing the trees and doing that. So those are the net revenues off of it there.
Phil, if we go back to the slide where you had that orange piece, maybe back, so in those revenue options, does it include those lots that have been developed?
No. Down here?
Yeah.
No.
So the triangle piece then actually contributes more because of those lower additions.
That's a really good point. So just to kind of restate what the mayor pointed out here, it's not, when the triangle piece comes into play and we go mine that material out, kind of in just looking at it straight up, you can see that there's 1, 2, 3, 4 lots that are now created. Granted, we had to go spend a bunch of money to mine this material out of here, but we created 4 lots out of it. Well, it's not just that. We then took this material that was mined out of here. There's a little bit right here. There's a lot of it right here. But what makes it better to get it here is that we can bring that road through there, and it just makes more sense. So by getting this little piece here, we're now able to logically mine all of that out of here, which allows us to bring this parcel of property online sooner. And even, and actually, this is maybe getting too far into the weeds, on our current estimates, by the time we go through to all this work, we're darn close to a wash on bringing this product online. So what it costs to bring the product online and then you sell it, it's just about a wash. Where if you were a private developer, you'd say, I'm never going to do that because I didn't make any money. In Ignite's case, in the city's case, once you've done that, you now have tax increment that can be generated and used to reimburse the city if that's the decision that's made with it, because you've brought this property online. That's one value of it. And the second value, which is maybe more important, is you've taken an unusable piece of property and you've planted homes on it and put families in there. And that's kind of what urban development is all about.
And Phil,
Yes, ma'am.
you bring up tax increment. I don't know, Troy, if you've done any, put anything together, maybe a 10-year forecast versing these different developments of tax increment, what it means to the city. Now, aside from just the net revenue to pay back a huge debt, what does it mean to the city going forward when we have to fund police and fire and parks for this development? And so I'd like to see something like that moving forward for discussion too.
So one of the things that will come out of this, whichever direction the council proceeds, where we were headed with the financial feasibility study when we were doing the Ignite workshop was, tell us, Ignite board, what your vision is if the triangle piece comes into your hands. Once that decision is made, we will then take and kind of run that through those whole scenarios. Well, we will run this as again, if this is the council's decision, we'll put this in as all single family, and we'll run that increment all the way out to the end of the district's life. So out 16, 17, 18 more years. We'll put in single family and townhome mixture in here, and we'll run it all the way out. And that's part of the financial feasibility study. Tony didn't want us to get into that until we had this discussion. And if the council decides to transfer the property as is or with conditions or however you all decide to do that, then once that's done, we can actually move forward and look at those things. Because it's quite a heavy lift to do that analysis.
Okay.
But it's
Thank you.
important to do and certainly important for the Ignite board and the council.
Bill, if I could just talk to Christie's point, I hear what you're saying, and I was just thinking that Riverstone's going to end, and we have been supporting Riverstone because it's tax increment for the last 20-some years. So this parcel, I think, as Riverstone ends, and we finally can fund the police and fire and all the things that we've always done in Riverstone without direct tax increment, I think that this piece is almost small compared to Riverstone, the education corridor. That was a big
urban renewal district, where this one appears, and maybe I'm wrong, is it seems smaller. It seems like we could almost get our hands around. So I always think like you, I'm more worried about getting the money paid back and let the development work, and the increment will be fine, but it's a big investment on the city side, where Riverstone and the other places were pretty much private, and schools and different things like that. I'm with you, though. I look at it, but I go, oh yeah, Riverstone's ending, so there'll be new revenue coming off of that, I think.
Yeah, the Lake District ends next year.
Like,
Yep.
okay.
So,
Okay, go ahead.
just one thing while you're talking about your triangle piece, is that something that requires action from the city in order to remove that? I'm talking the small triangle, not the entire thing, the tip of the triangle piece. That seems to make good sense to be able to utilize that, move things along, and solve a lot of problems. Is there action required from the city to be able to split that parcel up that way?
Yes, if we can chase a bunch of scenarios here, but if, let's say that the council decided, hey, we're going to keep the triangle piece, but we get that you guys want the tip, and it makes sense, and so we'll trade you the
So
tip
it can
or sell
still
you the.
happen either
Yeah,
way.
we could cut that off, and that could be transferred as a separate, we'd have to subdivide that parcel. We'd end up integrating this into the plat. There's also some wisdom of however the council decides of integrating this parcel within the current PUD, because the things that you're seeing in here, even in this option, there's some reasons for that to be included in the PUD, because it gives you better setbacks, smaller lots. If we were to go just develop that in its current C17 configuration, there would be some limitations that wouldn't allow everything that you see here. So however the council decides to proceed, and I think that's what Tony was hoping for tonight, is just some general observations of, hey, we understand what you're talking about, and here's what are important to us, A, B, and C. Generally speaking, we can then go back, if the council decides to move that, bring more data forward on the 15th, if that's what the next council meeting, if there's some idea to transfer it. But this becoming part of the PUD would have some pretty good value, however this parcel moves forward.
So Phil, is this drawing done considering that it's part of the PUD, or it's with the existing zoning now?
It's with the PUD, because we went in there, and these lots are a little bit bigger. The lots over here are about 45 feet wide. These are 65 feet wide. You can, if you were really getting, the land planner called it greedy, because when I was laying out the lots in here, I had them very small, and I think I had 12 or 14 lots in here. And of course, I'm just trying to be the capitalist and drive stuff, and he's trying to balance with creating a little bit more open space and give an opportunity for not just the residents to enjoy this, but to move through here. We could actually increase the lot density in here even more than what's shown here. It's going to be really tough to put a couple lots in there, Mayor, because that dirt is really steep in there, and you can kind of be promoting a problem there.
I guess greedy isn't the term that I would use. I would use that we're trying to be good stewards of the taxpayer money to pay.
That was my response
back the
as
debt.
well. But he did have a good point in here about putting an access through here would be pretty desirable. You can see that little corridor right through there. That one allows a stair access, but it doesn't allow a wheeled access. When you eliminate that lot right there, you can now put a little bit of a wheeled access in there. So if you're on your bike, you might want to get off, because it's still going to be pretty steep. And it's going to be a challenge to build it because it is so steep through there. But that was the reason that we had eliminated that one particular lot. Also, I should back up and say, we're way, way early in the process. We're still at 30,000 feet here. There's a ton of details once we get direction on where to head. But I don't want to give the impression that this is like really nailed down to the 10th of a foot, because it's not.
To ask a question about building on a cliff. That's not like unimaginable, correct?
No.
I mean,
Think
that's
of Hernan
standard
Terrace.
fare and terrace or whatever you call it, and sticks and stilts and, okay.
Yep. No, none of this is, and these, for those of you, I think all of you have probably been out here, this is really desirable. I mean, you're close to town, you're out here looking out over the river, and so it's very, very nice property. So it would be a more challenging lot to build on, but not impossible. We see it all over North Idaho.
So, Phil, which of these options that you're talking about in here, when you call it city option, ignite option, which of those options integrate that option into the PUD?
Any one of them. If we were to come out of this, Councilmember Miller, where the council says, gosh, we really love single family, and we really think it should be single family, and we want Ignite to move forward with it being single family, we would still say to council, we think you need to be part of the PUD, because what we think would be important to integrate that neighborhood into the Atlas neighborhood is getting the development standards tied to it and getting the architectural standards tied to it. Because you can imagine if this is a standalone neighborhood up here, unrelated to any of this, this could turn into the Wild West compared to the controls that we currently have down in the rest of the neighborhood with the development standards and with the architectural standards. So depending on, that would be a minimum, any of the recommendation or any of the selections that you see tonight, we would think that they should be part of the PUD.
So your presentation on the lot sizes and that are, this thumbnail look right now, consider that those options are in the PUD?
Yes.
Okay.
So Phil, we don't get to make a decision tonight, so you're just taking our feedback. So from one council member, what you just said, I really like the single family, I'd like it to be in the PUD. And then if you come back to us, I guess we make a collective group decision, but I base that, my fellow council members, on the debt we need to pay back, the desirability of this property, where it's located, and it's riverfront property. I just think that leans towards single family. As much as possible, we have multi-use units as well. And so that's my preference moving forward, but I don't think we even get to do anything tonight. You're looking for direction, and I'm not sure how we're going to give it to you.
But I think, if I might, Mayor, I think that's the kind of, the direction the mayor was kind of pointing Ignite is the council needs to have some voice into this process. So let's give opportunity for council to have voice. And if you have direction, it might be, gosh, we don't think there's enough units in there, go make them even smaller. And make them 45-foot wide lots in there and really drive the density up in there and come back with the residual land value, this number here, the net, and also give us an idea of the tax increment over, those are things we could come back on the 15th. You guys could look at it at that point and you might say, gosh, we're comfortable with that. And by the way, paint all the houses blue. I'm kidding on that one, but I think that's the idea if I was.
Yeah, I think this was going to be a presentation of all the options that had come out of Ignite and had come out of the team, and then allow council the opportunity over the next couple of weeks to email Phil with questions, and then it's, again, we can come back in 2 weeks and see if we're ready at that point in time to move forward. It could be that we need more information. I'm not sure if there's any particular timelines that we need to meet. I know there are some that you can't kick it down too far, but I just wanted to make sure that we had this very initial meeting, lay out all the options. Council may change it, can do whatever they would like with it, but give these next 2 weeks to really study the plan, because there's a lot of information here. And then like I said, communicate with Phil with any questions that you'd have.
Okay.
Amy.
First, I just appreciate you being here tonight and seeing these options. It's great. Super exciting.
Thank you.
I think we have an opportunity to address our housing needs in the community, right? In a really unique opportunity, and a diversity of options to me is desirable within this project. So I'd be in favor of, just with the information that we have here tonight, option 2 or 3, a mix of single family and townhomes will provide uniqueness and character to the project, which I think is desirable. I mean, we went and toured projects in neighboring towns, and we've seen examples over the years, and I think this would help set us up for success. So, thanks.
So, was Woody going? So my input would be, I think you need the tip. I mean, that plan needs to happen. I think that makes such really good sense. The two things that I didn't hear talking about, and Woody, you might even be able to speak to this a little bit, but I just went through this survey on the missing middle housing project, and the initial, there's a lot more coming down the road from that, but the survey results, as I recall, people wanted a mixed use of housing. Single family, was way up there, but retirees want smaller housing, and startup folks want smaller housing. So I think having some more input on how that missing middle results come back, we've spent a lot of money on that, affect this project before we don't have control over that. And I'd sure like to see more information on detail of financials for the long run spread out. That's what I have.
If I might, with looking at the tax increment revenue streams for the different options.
I guess the point that I would have is that it's going to be difficult to fit a missing middle concept into this project. I mean, I don't know exactly what the price point of missing middle is, but even those townhomes are going to be spending.
They're going to be like 600,000, I think.
And Hillary, maybe you could speak to this, but I don't think that the missing middle is a price point issue. It's a style, the way I understand it. It's a product delivery. Go ahead.
That's correct. Good evening, Mayor and Council. So yeah, missing middle does not mean middle income housing. It doesn't have anything to do with the price. It's the style of housing. So it's everything in between detached single-family and mid-rise apartments. So it's townhouses, it's live-work units, it's cottage cluster, it's
How does that fit into the conversation then about affordable housing if it has nothing to do with price?
Well, by creating additional housing product types, it creates more naturally affordable housing units just by virtue of allowing more choices. So when we drafted, as we're working on the code, it was never intended to just be for affordable housing. It's just allowing more housing product choices in the community, which does help, because then
And I think the thing that I learned about this too is that, and we're looking at some of them that I think the Active West units were describing, that was, duplexes and fourplexes, and those were the kinds of things that aren't necessarily a lower price point of a house, but they're a product choice that people are wanting, is that smaller footprint, smaller yard, smaller, things to take care of, and HOAs and that are within that, or that sort of thing. So I guess as we're moving through, what does this growth look like in our comp plan, and we don't address some of the missing middle, the product types. Diversity here is just the thing that I'm not seeing those two connect.
And the one thing to point out too, so when we first started this project, Phil mentioned, we did the community organization representatives, we had the core vision, people came here and said what they wanted to see, but we also, one of the core values for the project itself is to have a variety of housing choices. So we made that very clear from the very beginning, that that's one of the core values, is we didn't want it to just be all single family or just apartments, and so we really wanted to have a mix of housing product types throughout, because it creates more community, it creates diversity, it creates, when you go to a project like Kendall Yards, or you go to some of these places in other communities and you're like, wow, this feels great. There's like a little mixed use area, there's retail, there's different housing product types, there's the park, all those things just fits together. And the triangle piece is it's kind of that missing puzzle piece. And so I think it's important how we.
So I guess I'm just a little confused as to, we've been talking about affordable housing, and and maybe I misread it right, but I thought this missing middle was meant to address affordable housing. I mean, that's one of the biggest challenges we have right now in our community, is affordable housing.
Correct. So it's not designed to be affordable housing. So it's, yeah.
Why do they call it missing middle?
Because there's not a product choice.
It's basically,
variety.
like I said, it's between single-family detached and mid-rise apartments. And so you see it a lot in our existing neighborhoods in the downtown area, where you'll have an old mansion's been converted into 4 units, so that's missing middle. So you'll see the live-work units, townhouses, those are
that hasn't
missing
happened
middle.
for a long time, converting mansions into fourplexes, because that hasn't been allowed for a long time.
And
Anyway, I guess my point was that the people and the information I was reading is, it wasn't about, well, we want higher density because it's lower cost. It's, we want higher density because that's our lifestyle choice. And I think Active West is kind of a good example of that, in that some of their, they have duplexes, fourplexes, or single families, but they're in a lifestyle choice product that we don't have a ton of. And that's all I was wondering about, is if we're addressing how that work came out.
But Active West is in the development
They are.
right now, as well as multifamily, and
Right.
so there is I think that as of right now, that there is quite a diversity, and just as it sits right now.
I think there is too, and I guess my concern is that we know this project, that we have a lot of debt that we have to focus on. I don't know that this is the project for all different kinds of housing. I just think we need to focus on, first of all, getting the highest amount we can get out and making quality projects. And we already have quite a bit of diversity. I think that I find it difficult to be in the position of, we will lower the value of what's returned to the city to have a certain kind of style. That doesn't make fiscal sense to me.
I guess it was public input for such a long time that it kind of became second nature to me, that that's what we had talked about, and that's what people wanted, and that's what we drew, and that's the way we discussed it. And so, I think single family is great. It's highly desirable, and it's going to pay us back, and we're going to make a boatload of money. It's just we aren't going to make money. We're going to pay ourselves back.
Pay our debt, right.
And I'm, but that was just kind of the model and the things we talked about for a number of years. So I'm still very open-minded and want to see this work.
And I think that what might shed a little bit light on that is one of the things that you all are asking for is running the scenario out 20 years and running it out 6 or 7 years and looking at, if we look at the revenue that's developed off the rest of this at the end of when it's all sold out, and you see that number in comparison to the difference between townhome or single family here, the number may be so small, the difference in the aggregate, that you might say, and I don't want to diminish numbers, because when you're talking $10,000, it's a lot of money. But in the spectrum, and I think we could bring that back and talk about the sensitivity on the bottom line if this is single family or townhome, and that's maybe would shed a little bit more light on it. So I think we can bring that data forward.
I just want to say thank you for that, because I think it would create a broader picture for us, right?
Yeah.
I mean, this information is great, but a long-term financial picture would be extremely helpful.
And I think if what I hope I'm hearing is you guys are boiling it down, that you don't want me to chase hotel and multifamily and office on here, because it's a big effort to go through and do that analysis, which it's important, and if that's what the council wanted to run those scenarios out on all of them, we could certainly doing that. But boiling it down to 2 scenarios where this is all single family, or it's single family down here and townhome up here, if we ran those 2 scenarios and came back with a more extensive financial presentation, and you'd get it in a memo ahead of time, so you have time to contemplate it.
Yeah.
Well, I've got a couple of thoughts, feedback on it. I certainly get the difference between, in one context, when you're talking about the missing middle, which is architectural style and stuff, and has nothing to do with price points and affordable housing. We need, sounds like we need both, and we certainly need affordable housing, and I'm a real proponent of that, and we've got to build that into our big picture of what we're doing. But this is also a very, when you look at the geographic area of the whole Atlas Water Park, it is still just kind of a postage stamp of the city of Coeur d'Alene, or even that area of town. So we can't try to do too many things within that one little postage stamp. So I think this is something where, and early on, it's like, well, we got to sell off some of the waterfront, because to be honest, my God, that's how we're going to pay for the thing. But then it kind of moved along, and at a point, which I support, that, all of the waterfront is going to be forever to the public use, and that's great. But that's some conscious trade-offs. I mean, I still hear people saying, why don't you make the whole thing into a park? And it's like, well, because we can't afford it, you cannot afford it for what we've got to do. So I think we've made a great balance, and actually, as I was thinking about this, and of course part of the Ignite, so I've got a lot of the background, but I also, on one hand, consider, well, that's still really above my pay grade. I'm not into, I'm not a real estate developer or knowing that kind of thing, but I think I do have some common sense on what boils down to, we do have to maximize our return on this. Greedy is a harsh word, but maximizing the revenue for this project to pay back, that's a good thing, and all of the things that it's going to do. So I guess my 2 cents is, given all of that, I think this is the place to maximize. Sounds like the single family is probably going to be the way to do that. That's not diminishing the need for the rest of it at all. We need to do that within our broader context, but anyway, that's where my 2 cents.
Phil, could you go back to, go ahead, Woody.
I got a nickel's worth. Couple of things. I was just thinking about this little project and thinking back on Riverstone for 20 years or whatever it's been. And I remember Riverstone developing very slowly, couldn't get quite going, and then the people came along the river and they put up, what would you guys, you call it the Wild West. Along the river, they've got their private river places. And then it backfilled in between, some offices, some doctors are in there, and then the mall came, and then apartments came, and now hotels are coming, and more businesses are coming. So that's been the evolution of Riverstone in my mind. We had private, high-end stuff on the river, and then the regular folks came back in. I'm looking at this somewhat the same way, because the project you guys have designed so far with this is that middle, what do you call it, middle housing? Missing middle, because you have all that, to me, it's that strange shaped buildings and stuff that kind of fulfill those needs, and you've got it spread around there with these ideas. So it kind of leaves me going, well, the top piece with 17 lots should be the Wild West, and let the big folks have a private road in there, keep it simple. We don't have to plow it, we don't have to clean it. And it's probably generating the most tax base eventually for the next generation, but that gives them, that's kind of like the river folk, right? River, now we're up on top of it looking down on it, and below there is all the middle, what we call the middle income or missing middle, just keeps sticking, because that's all that creative stuff, little lots and weird little things. And when I say weird, I don't mean bad, I just mean different from what we used to have.
But to clarify, Woody, you're talking about you would actually support a gated community up
Absolutely. Make it is the high end, and we don't have to mess with it. We get the best dollar return. We get to use their dirt to create it down the road. 17 spots. How many are along the river? That's what I'm saying. It's just you're balancing it. We got regular folks down below, and we got some high enders up on top. It would just seem
I would never go for the gated there, but anyway.
Okay. Well, but we got gated on the river practically, right? There's some private spots just down the river from this, where the dog park is. That's all I'm saying is, it's not like we haven't done this before or hasn't been done before. It just seems like you're thinking, let's get the most money out of it we can, and gating it makes the future even cheaper, right? Don't have to take care of the streets. Don't have to sweep, don't have to rake leaves, or it'll be pine needles, right? I'm just saying, that's sort of the extreme, but it works in my mind because that's kind of how Riverstone is. If you think about it, the high end's on the river. Well, we save the river for the folks. And
Portion of Mill River too. There's a portion of Mill River that it has a pretty diverse housing type.
And I think we could chase the value proposition of making it gated, because what does that really mean to the lot sale value? So we could bring that back and at least have an estimation of what does it mean.
And then they could be the Wild West. They don't have to stick to the architectural stuff. You could have something up there that maybe looked like the White House, like old Coeur d'Alene. What, are we against that? Oh yeah, it's got to be this and that and fancy doodahs. Again, it's just, let them spend their money however they want to. Make it special, make it valuable, and it helps us out in the long run. I know, it's okay, it'll pass.
Sounds like we have a clear consensus.
Bill, could you go back to a slide that shows Mount Hink Because I just wanted to talk about that and maybe refresh council on what the plans are. So you have those two pit areas that you were going to bring in dirt and make those buildable, but then there is some excess of Mount Hink, and what, in the plan, what is the plan for Mount Hink? Is there a funding mechanism now in place, you know, in the long-term plan to do something with Mount Hink? I think that's probably the however many years down the road, but that's probably the last piece of the Atlas puzzle, is what to do with Mount Hink.
That's a good summary, Mayor, and right, you guys can kind of see the topography that exists right there. One of the things, the council may be aware of this, may not. One of the things that we did during the construction of the park is, as we were rooting around out here and moving dirt around, and we were looking at it, and we knew what the constituents were, we just didn't know how effective it would be to process that material to separate them from each other. And so Tommy LaRiviere, who, if those of you that know him, he's a creative guy, and he says, gosh, I think we could go separate all that stuff, and I'm willing to prove it to you. So he moved in his screen, and he processed probably 1,000 yards of material on his own nickel. And we created a nice stockpile of topsoil, a stockpile of rock, and a stockpile of some other stuff. And we essentially proved we could do it economically. The project saved about $150,000, which we were able to then take and deal with some of the unsuitable material we found down in this area, some big gooey mud bogs we found. So it kept the project on budget. So using that idea, Mayor, and I anticipate this is the direction we might head, is just processing this entire mountain of material. There's about 80,000 yards of material there. You could process it, sell it for a royalty, where the city doesn't necessarily have any, or the Ignite doesn't have any money that's going out. They just allow LaRiviere, for instance, to process it, and he sells it. And for every yard of material he sells, he gives a certain amount of money to Ignite. I just did some ballpark numbers with him, just trying to get a number, where that might be. It might generate about $500,000 or $600,000 of material, of money, of revenue, $500,000 or $600,000 of revenue out of that material, and now you would end up with a flat area. It might take us 5 or 6 years. Maybe it goes faster because you would be selling it to the general public. We've had a lot of it tested, DEQ. You guys have seen Steve Gill up here with Mike Gridley, and Steve and DEQ have been a great partner to the city. What he has tested so far has come back clean. There's not any undesirable materials in there, so we would continue to do that testing. But that's one scenario, Mayor, is to just process. It's going to take time, though.
I guess if you live in that neighborhood and you spend a lot of money to build your home, having that going on for 4 or 5 years might be a bit of a negative.
Absolutely. So
that's something to
yeah.
So if let's just say if you were to take all of that stuff off of there, I don't know where you'd take it, but and then you're just saying that even if you took all the stuff off of it, you still have unsuitable from ground down quite a few feet.
Which I don't think that there's enough. I don't think the council or Ignite would have the stomach to remediate that, because from our boring that unsuitable goes down about another 65 feet.
So at one time, that was a big, huge hole
Yeah.
that was filled in over the years.
Yes, and so there's 80,000 yards of material kind of from the ground up, the surface that you drive on in here, and there's probably another 150,000 down that we would have to mine out of there and then replace it to get to flat. So that's why we have kind of looked at this and said, barring some fantastic source of structural material and some fantastic place to take this unsuitable material, it's not economically feasible. So it probably needs to be turned into some sort of recreational space that can live, or you can go build on it. It's just that the construction technique gets very expensive because you're putting it on drilled piles, that go way through that 65-foot material. You still have parking issues to deal with because your parking lot can go like that.
At what point in the process of that development do you think that there needs to be a solid plan there? Because if you're in, is it Area 6 that's closest to there?
Area 7 is right here.
Area 7?
Yeah.
I think that anyone that is going to build a home or townhome or whatever living place they're going to have there, they're going to want to know what's going on behind them.
Absolutely.
So at some point in time in the near future, we're going to have to develop a plan there, and the plan's going to need to come with a budget,
Absolutely.
because there isn't a budget for it now.
It's in the gigantic 20-year pro forma. But does it happen in 2021 or 2029? And some of that depends on how quickly these lots sell out, because if phase two, we'll call everything else that's out here, if phase two sells out next year, which I don't think that would be prudent for us to do that, because you're starting to cause product to compete with its neighbor. So you would want to release these. But if it sells out over the next 3 or 4 years, the residual land value that comes off of here could support remediation of that. The net revenue that comes off of the sale could support remediation of that, depending on how much Ignite in the city decide to do the debt reimbursement thing, which is a whole other discussion. But the net revenue that comes off of this is projected to be pretty high.
So at some point in the near future, we're going to have to say, okay, we want this into some type of public use, right? And then we get some designer say, hey, this is what you could be made here. This is what the plan would cost if you want to make it into this.
Absolutely, because there's ways that you could use the material out there. I mean, you can envision shaping it into a bowl. You know, you'd process some of it and sell it away. You'd shape it into a bowl, turn it into an amphitheater. You'd put a field down the middle of it and use the slopes to create the grandstands. So when you're up here having a soccer game, there's a berm along this edge that the noise is not bothering the people down here. So there's all kinds of different ideas. We just haven't chased them at this point because there hasn't been kind of a clear request for that to happen. Bill hasn't, kind of jumped in and weighed in on what the possibilities. We've just, at this point, been looking at it going, there's a lot of material there. But now we have some ideas about how effective the processing of the material is.
And I do think it's going to affect the overall development. At some point down the road, people are going to, what's going on with this?
Absolutely, because I think if and I look at it a lot, because I drive out here and I look at it as a little bit of an eyesore. And Tony and I have talked about at what point do we get in there and at least just shape it into something that looks nice and just hydroseed it, if nothing else. Put some dryland grass seed on it. So it isn't kind of this weird misshapen with trees growing out the side of it and an unkept mountain. We turn it into something that looks a little presentable without a big investment.
Woody?
Yeah, on those same lines, so doing Mount Hink and fixing this and processing it, the money comes from the increment?
No, it comes from the sale of the soil. So if you can, just to run a scenario, if the contractor goes out there and he processes 1,000 yards of material and it costs him $10, it costs him $5. You can turn around and sell that topsoil. Topsoil goes for $18-20 a yard. So let's say the city or the Ignite says, we're going to sell it for 15. It costs 10 to process it. You sell it for 15. So now that $5 goes back to Ignite. And we did a very conservative approach on it and kind of doing that, looking at that math, and it would generate $500,000 or $600,000.
But you're talking about that needs to be done in a timely fashion, but we don't, so you have to kind of put some money into the pot to begin with, and that comes from where?
Ignite.
From the selling of the properties?
Well, part of it is I've got 7 different variables here, and I've only got 5 equations, so I can't solve the thing. I need one of the variables to stop. So I need the one or 2 of them to stop. And so when we get a decision on the triangle parcel, now we can start planning ahead. And Tony and I have talked about it, and we're getting close to presenting to the Ignite board that we start processing this sooner than later. Because certainly we need to process this to be able to move the material up into pit 1, and we want to start processing up in here as well in order to get area 7 uncovered, because currently area 7 is covered with unsuitable soils and we need to get it off of there. So rather than handling it multiple times, we put it right into the processor and start building a sellable product. But it's hard to kind of head down those paths until we get some of the variables to stop moving, so we can provide a clear economic picture to the Ignite board and the city council.
Phil, do you think on Mount Hink that regardless of what's done there, that some material will have to be moved out of there? Or do you think it'd be possible, you talked about if you reshape something into something, or
I think
some
we
of
could-
it gonna have to go?
No, I think we could reshape it into something, particularly along this edge. If you guys are familiar with it, you can kind of see the trail that heads down to the Prairie Trail right there. There's some room in there to create a deeper fill in there, relatively steep slope coming off the edge, and we could hide a bunch of it back into here and create a berm along that edge right there and a berm on this edge. That wouldn't look so weird. And if, we get the landscape architects involved and they'll make it look interesting in there. And Bill has talked about the ideas of putting an arboretum in there so there's a diversity of tree species, and it would be kind of a cool space to go occupy. But again, we kind of need, some of it is just direction from the city saying, we want a recreational area in there, or we want it converted into just an arboretum with a natural space, or what is the vision for that area?
So does council have, I think everyone's has kind of given some information of what they would like to have next time. Phil, do you have enough to come back? I think we've narrowed it down to options 1, 2, or 3 are ones that we'd like to see more information on.
Okay.
Next time.
And one of the things, Mr. Mayor, that if it could be an action item, and Councilmember Miller pointed it out, is if the council were able to act, if you were able to act on nothing else, but agreeing to transfer that little tip at the next meeting, that would allow us to really kind of get after what we're trying to accomplish there. Because back to the point you made, Mayor, about the time frame, the Ignite Board has a time frame, and they keep telling me the market is hot and we want product on the market, and we want it on. Councilman English is laughing because he's one of them that says, get it on the market, get it on the market. So we're trying to move as expeditiously as possible to get into phase 2 so we can put product on the market in the spring through that RFP process. That little triangle piece being agreed to be transferred would help a lot.
So if we're still debating after next time's meeting, it would be nice to look at a possible decision on that.
Yeah, just even if it's just that piece, it would really help us advance the ball on the next plat.
Is it possible to just have staff come up with a report on what it would take to do that by the next meeting?
Yeah, we can.
Yeah.
Let's do it.
Anything, Phil, did you have anything?
No, sir.
Anything from council? All right.
Okay, thank
Be
you.
continued. So announcements, council announcements. Kiki, you had some things?
I know, I've been so in another park here that I forgot what I was going to announce. Historic Preservation had a comment about the museum is coming to do a presentation on what their rollout plans were, and wanted to know if council would be interested in seeing that presentation as well. So I thought I'd bring that up, and if so, then council, if you just want to maybe shoot the mayor a yay or nay on that, they'd be happy to come work out the agenda and do a presentation on the museum. And the other thing is that the Library Foundation has autographed Mudgy and Millie merchandise for sale, and it can be picked up on December 11th. So you can order it online, and it'll be available in time for Christmas. I don't know if Mudgy or Millie or the author or all of them signed them, but they do have all of those together, and that's a fundraiser for the foundation.
Mudgy and Amelia are available to sign?
No, they used to do that in purpose, and you can't sign them either, but, yeah, in person, but online.
Amy?
So a few months ago, the Coeur Arts Commission issued a call to artists for a new public art piece. The piece is to be located at the Four Corners area in Coeur. That's at the intersection near Memorial Field and City Park, near the Human Rights Education Institute. It is anticipated that the artwork will affirm the longstanding commitment of our community to the equality of all people, to human rights, the dignity and worth of every individual, and social and economic justice for all. So 5 artist finalists were selected to prepare proposals, including mock-ups, which are called maquettes, of their proposed pieces. Those pieces are actually starting to arrive currently. In the past, the maquettes were placed on display in several locations throughout the city so that the public could go and view them and vote for their favorite in person. Unfortunately, due to COVID-19 and the concerns that brings, the commission is going to try something new. Citizens will have the opportunity to vote for their favorite art piece via an online survey, which will include the artist's statements regarding the vision for the artwork. It'll have photos of the maquettes, and the public will also have an opportunity to view photos of the artist's past projects. So I just want to give a heads up to keep your eye out for the link to the survey. It'll be posted on the City of Coeur d'Alene's website and Facebook pages, and it'll also be sent out through other media channels, a press release in the local paper. So just be on the watch for that, and you'll have a chance to vote on the new art piece.
Thank you, Amy. Anything else from anyone? Dan?
Well, I would like to address an issue that we've been getting emails on, and there's been some comments and things in the paper, I think based on, unfortunately, a lot of misinformation out there and folks that don't necessarily have the whole picture, but dealing with the intervention station that has been talked about. This is will be something from the Idaho Department of Corrections that's going to be in a number of cities around the state, and these are places where people who are on parole, so these are folks who have already been in prison, they've come out, now they're in the stage where they're, back into the community. They've got to find a job, find housing, do all of that, stay away from whatever temptations that led them there in the first place. And these are folks, these are our folks. These aren't a bunch of folks who got, shipped in from all over the country. These are folks who were, by and large, probably from here, might be, your family, it might be the neighbor's kid down the street who mowed the lawn or babysat your kids or something, who, went down the wrong path, did their time, and are coming back and are, frankly, on kind of a razor-thin edge of falling through the ice, and when they need some extra help, that's what this is going to do. One of the things is that I think a lot of people are getting it confused with the proposed re-entry center, which is for folks who, that is a residential program where folks would come in and do some of the same kinds of things, but they would live in there and be employed, and as kind of another step in their process of reintegration into the community. But this is not that. This is basically like an office 6 days a week where they could come in and get the services and case management, more like with a counselor or something like that. And so that's that's an important distinction. And there's been some folks, some of the emails we're getting is, hey, we had that, I thought we already had this on the ballot, and 78% or something already told you that we don't want this here, so what are you even talking about? Well, that was an advisory ballot, an advisory issue on the county ballot that, I've been on record before that I'm not a fan of advisory votes because they have no meaning, context in law in terms of they don't enforce anything, they don't put anything to action. Usually it's just kind of a dodge for elected officials who don't want to take a hard stand one way or the other. And but that was for a countywide issue that doesn't impact the city of Coeur d'Alene and was not an initiative to draw anything, so there isn't any direction that we would take from that. For whatever reason, there's discussions, and like a lot of things you can see, there's kind of a moving targets. People talk back and forth at different points. So apparently at one point that was talked about being at that building at like 421 Coeur d'Alene Avenue, but that is not where the final one would be. It would be, in the Harbor Plaza, where actually appropriately maybe with, some of the elected official federal offices, where their local congressional offices, and there's counselors and different things. So I think that's where it's going to be. So it's not anywhere near a school. So anyway, I just hope that folks would if they have a question, ask it and get accurate information. But this is something that, I'm convinced from a lot of time working in that kind of a system and working with the folks. I mean, this is something that is frankly going to be more cost effective, which is something we're for. And by having these kinds of resources in place, it is going to provide better community safety, not be a higher risk for community safety. Thanks.
Can I just ask a question? Dan, I appreciate all of that, what you just said, but I don't think it's ever going to fall under the purview of city business, right? I mean, it's not, it's a state program.
Yeah.
Exactly. However, if you're like me, you're getting emails about it where, I'm seeing stuff in the paper that is being directed to us. And so, but I think that's a good point to clarify that folks, if they have a strong opinion one way or the other about it, we are not the ones to talk to.
No, it's a city.
Thank you.
All right, Woody.
I gotta follow that up. Guess what? It's Salmon Friday coming, you guys. Lake City Center is serving salmon again. One of
I saw the
Troy,
picture. It was great.
one of Troy's favorites. Also, we're asking for a donation of $6. And if I recall, Bill said it was the best salmon he ever ate. We're serving it for an hour on Friday the 4th from 11 to 12. You call in before 11, make sure they have it for you. You drive through, give them $6, and you got a salmon lunch. It's awesome. The number, 208-667-4628. Call them, tell them you want to eat some of the Bill's salmon. All right? Thanks.
Thanks, Woody. All right, consent calendar, Woody.
Oh, I had to wake up now. I'd like to move to approve this consent calendar as presented, including Resolution 20064.
Motion, do we have a second?
Second that.
Motion and a second to approve the consent calendar. Any discussion?
Can I bring up, I'm going to do this briefly, but Mr. Becker, could you come up? And I wanted to talk just real quickly about the wastewater policy amendments program. And I was zooming in during the Public Works meeting, and one of the things that I had asked was, how are we, and how does this affect, are we following Idaho Standard Public Works Code? Does it align with that? And we talked earlier about how does this affect new or upgrading bidders on being able to be aware and provide us with a competitive bid when we have a one-page that turns into a 41-page. And the only folks who really know that are contractors who've been working along as those changes incur. You had some great information that you gave me about that. Can you just briefly share with the rest of council how that works and allows council to still receive be involved in a competitive bid process?
Certainly. So the policies, as you are aware, have been around since the 90s, and they're more or less procedures for trying to establish a uniform criteria or expectations of infrastructure that will be turned over to the city of Coeur d'Alene. So we will own it, operate it, and maintain it. And trying to establish some kind of uniformity in that is somewhat difficult to the point where we follow ISPWC, which is Idaho State Public Works Construction standards. But we also have some criteria that's written in there that makes it more compatible with the rest of the city of Coeur d'Alene's infrastructure, i.e., we're able to know how to work on equipment. Part of that process is reaching out to the development community. We plan on doing this in multiple ways. One, we're going to be posting these policies similar to how our design standards are on the city's website. We're going to post that in multiple locations. I had a conversation with the clerks. That way, there'll be some on the wastewater directory as well as on the city's website. Two, we're going to reach out to the engineering community and the architectural community to let them know Now, obviously, we can reach out to the local ones, but it's a little difficult to know who's going to come into the city of Coeur d'Alene in the future. So often we have these projects where the development community submits something to the planning department or the building department. We will plan on having a single packet that we can hand out to them. Now, during bidding projects, such as the city's projects or the private development projects, what we plan on doing is conducting these mandatory pre-bid projects. Pre-bid meetings. So if you want to bid on this project, you're welcome to attend this meeting. You're going to get information. Generally, a contractor or a developer that would come to the city of Coeur d'Alene that would want to do a project, they're going to want to attend this meeting so they can get firsthand information of what their expectations are going to be on the city's projects. Now, these go for the city's biddable projects. On development projects, we're going to do everything we can to reach out to these folks. But at the same time, if they don't want to attend these mandatory pre-bid conferences, we can't force their hand. So, again, we will reach out to both, I mentioned earlier, we'll reach out to the engineering and architectural community. We will also reach out to the local contractors in the area to let them know too. And it probably wouldn't hurt to notify them via other media sources. So we're doing as much as we can to help level that playing field, and where local contractors as well as non-local contractors will have the same access to the same information.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anything else? Roll call, please, Renata.
Wood,
Yes.
Evans,
Yes.
Miller,
Yes?
McEvers,
Yes.
Gookin,
Aye.
English.
Yes.
Motion carried. Other business, update and approval of relocation of COVID municipal small business grant program funds. Stephanie.
Good evening. I have something to share. So, kind of something interesting for coronavirus. We have one piece that is coming to an end, which doesn't seem to be happening with the coronavirus lately. The applications for our small business grants are finished, and as of 5 o'clock tonight, we had received 6 additional from what you guys have heard of through this package. So through that, there was an additional about $3,500 request today that came, well, not just today, but between last week and today. Today was interesting. A lot of people did call wanting to get their last-minute applications in. I walked a lot of people through that. Unfortunately, most people that had made that phone call were in Hayden or Post Falls or in some outlying area of the city. So for the amount of calls that we received, we didn't get that many applications, which is okay. So I feel really good about the different allocations that we did put the money towards the committee. We really did service our youth and our senior centers for the community, which I think that's great. We've provided a good, safe environment for our children and for our elderly in the community. So excited about that. But that leaves us with approximately $100,000 of the $340 that was allocated from our $1.7 million original CARES Act funds. So with your approval, I would like to take that $100,000, put it back into our general options for the city's items. There's already been a lot of people or departments that have requested different items. We may have some more requests for some mask things. Some specific respirators that are being needed to transport patients, unfortunately, from our medical facilities here down to other medical facilities. It's about a 4-hour drive for our EMS. So, and our police officers would like some extra masks for protection when they have to do some investigations of a deceased body. So that's going to quickly use up our extra $100,000.
So the number that we have in our packet was 150. So you're saying that that has changed now with the last minute applications that came in, so you're saying that that number is 100?
It is, yes. Yep.
And when you say general purpose, I guess in my mind I translate that to like the general fund, which is everything like we might pay utility bills, but it's more like it's still for COVID-related, activities, but within our city department, so it's still pretty narrow.
Very, yes. It
Okay.
still has to go to the state controller's office for approval, yes.
Yep, okay,
It'll follow the same CARES Act guidelines.
good.
Any questions for Stephanie?
I think that's a great use of the funds. Clearly, we have our own in-house need for some items, and it's a proper way to address it, so I support it.
Thank you.
I'll have to give kudos to Stephanie and her team, because it all started with a phone call of the original person that, a business, to say, hey, I saw this was available. Talked to Troy talked to Vonnie got together with Stephanie, and this whole thing happened and helped 46-plus businesses. And you and your team, and you had a volunteer board that helped you with it. You
Great
guys-
committee. It was awesome to work with each and every one of them. Hillary's department, Hillary was a huge help.
Yeah,
Yes,
you guys did a
yes.
great job with that. So if there are no other questions, we'd be looking for council action.
Mr. Mayor, I'll make a motion to authorize staff to reallocate the $100,000
Yes, it's down to 100 now.
of the unallocated portion of the $340,000 of the municipal small business grant program back to the city of Coeur d'Alene for general purpose.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried. Thank you, Stephanie.
Thank you.
And now we have resolution number 20065, approval of amendment number 2 to the local 710 collective bargaining agreement for the new EMS officer. And we have Chief Gabriel as our closer tonight.
With no slides. Well, good evening, and this is a very exciting evening for your fire chief. As you will recall, the last budget process, you approved an EMS officer for us, and it's a need that we've been wanting to fill for quite a while, but the timing was never right. So this year, everything kind of went sideways, and your fire department took on the responsibility of infection control for the city. We happen to have a firefighter with a lot of experience in this, moved them into that role interim, and created a one-stop shop for administration as well as department heads for safety guidelines, and for most important, I think, was what to do if you think that somebody from your department was negatively affected by the pandemic. So I think we can all tout that as a great success. I think, well, I'm positive that our city has been a role model for surrounding cities on how we've handled city government and how we've handled internal issues. And I think a great deal of that has to be, we need to put that back at our council because you have the wisdom to fund this position. So I think it's been a great success. That person will also continue to be the infection control officer into the future for the city. So it'll still have that dual role. With that, this position is what I say owned. It's not owned, but it falls under the contract with the International Association Local 710, International Association of Firefighters Local 10. And to get to the hiring process, what we have to do is get this amendment put in place to their contract because that is where it falls. My hope was to get this done prior to the hiring process, which starts next week with the hiring date of January 1st, and that falls perfectly into the timeline that we have wanted to do. I truly, honestly want to thank the council, the mayor, Troy for giving great guidance through this, Randy Adams for doing a wonderful job helping this, Melissa for always doing her magic, Deputy Chief Tom Greif for helping get this thing written, and Union President Brian Judge, who's my partner, and he just does a wonderful job, and it's something we should all be proud of, is the city's collective relationship with that local. They do a great job for us, and they've been a huge help. Mr. Mayor, with that, I would ask that the council approves an amendment to the contract, the International Association of Firefighters 710 for an EMS position.
I'd make a motion to that regard.
Second.
Motion and a second. Questions for Kenny or discussion?
So Kenny, this is not an administration job.
It is.
It is admin.
It is, yes, sir.
Admin is under the local?
It is, it gets to a certain point. Deputy chiefs and above are not.
Okay.
Any position below is.
Gotcha. I was trying to find the line there.
Indeed, yes.
Thank you.
Any other discussion or questions? So we have a motion and a second. Roll call, please, Renata.
Miller,
Aye.
McEvers,
Oh, yeah.
Guggen,
Sure.
English,
Yes.
Wood,
Yes.
Evans.
Yes.
Motion carried. Thank you, Kenny.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Motion and a second to adjourn. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you, everyone. We are adjourned.